4:50.
It takes a minute to get it up on Facebook.
All good. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see everyone in one room. Staggering away. How's the learning going? I see a little bit. The zal's a little bit scattered here and there, but got to keep it going. What's that? It's all your fault, Ruby. All right, let's begin. We started a new Sicha, which is a special kuntris the Rebbe wrote about the secrets of the Torah Shebal Peh, basically called that the Torah Shebal Peh Einu B'Telin Li'olam, will never be negated. And we started off last class by explaining that the Rambam explains on a pasuk, right, that Hashem gave us the luchos ha'evan, the stone tablets, the Torah and the mitzvah. And he explained that the luchos is the luchos, the Torah is the 5 books of Moses, and the mitzvah, who remembers what the mitzvah was? The oral Torah, the explanation of all the mitzvahs, right? Orally. So there's actually a pasuk in the Torah which explains that Hashem gave us all the explanations of the written Torah orally. And the Rambam, in his introduction, basically explains that he found it necessary to clarify every single part of the oral Torah. And he makes this kind of very controversial claim that he's going to sort of do it once and for all, so that there should not be a need to go into any other Sfarim, but you could have the Chumash and his book, and from here you'd know all the written Torah and all the oral Torah in one place, and you won't need any other books in between. And therefore he called it the Mishnah Torah, which means second to the Torah, and he basically was trying to lay out once and for all what's called the mitzvah, the whole oral Torah in one place at one time. You don't need anything else. That's what we said last time. Let's take it from inside. Second column, the first column, the second paragraph. He says, Av shechiburu shel Rambam. Even though the Rambam's work is called Torah Shebal Peh, Mishnah Torah, right? Mishnah the Torah Shebekasav, which means second to the written Torah. Mikom makom liosim devarim hamizbarim below kushi below piruk, because he brings the oral Torah in a clear language, without any difficulties and without any questions. In other words, he doesn't go. It's not the argument and the analysis which brings us to the conclusions of what the explanation of the mitzvahs is. It's just the final reality of the explanation of the mitzvahs, according to the Rambam at least. They're called the halachas of the Torah Shebal Peh. Yesh bo chashivos miyuchedes. The Rebbe says this book has a unique importance. Lo rak legabi shar chelki Torah Shebal Peh, not only in comparison to all the other works of the oral Torah, which would obviously be that it's sort of bringing you the psak, right? All the other works of the oral Torah before him were basically arguments trying to arrive at it. So it obviously has a certain importance in compared to the other oral Torah. Elegam legabi sifra neviim bakasuvim. This is an important statement that he's making here. He says that the Rambam Sefer, and I guess in this capacity any Sefer of Halacha, has a importance even over and above the Nevi'im and the Kesuvim, the rest of what we call the Nach, which is also part of the written Torah. Why? Shikamo chashivus to Torah shebekasav, because the Rambam's work, he wants to say, has the same level of importance as the actual Torah shebekasav, the written Torah of Moshe, the Torah and the mitzvahs, the Torah shebekasav, and its explanation, the laws of the Torah, the actual halachas. Why are we suddenly saying that the Rambam's Mishnah Torah has more importance than the Nevi'im and the Kesuvim? Where do you get across saying such a thing?
Well, it's more useful.
Forget more useful. I mean, it's more useful than the Torah Shebekasav also, in the sense that, useful means practical.
Because it brings it to a place you can understand.
Okay, but I'm saying let's look inside before we start running around with it. Yeah. It's understood from the statement of the Chazal, which is also brought as halacha in the Rambam's book, right? It's brought in halacha in the Sefer of the Rambam. Kol Sifra Nevi'im, v'kol hakasuvim asidli batel limos Mashiach. He says all of the works of the prophets and the writings, which is basically the 19 books of the written Torah, other than the 5 books of Moshe. Rambam paskins in the laws of Megillah in the Mishnah Torah, they will be batul in the future, in the days of Mashiach. Right? They're going to basically go away, except for the Megillas Esther. That's why he brings it there, because it has a specialness. Whereas not so the halachas of the Torah Shabbal Peh. Halachas of the Torah Shabbal Peh, einon betel liolam, they never become, so to speak, negated and go away. Kechamisha chumshei Torah. And they are just like the 5 books of Moses, are eternal and will never sort of be batul. So to the halacha. So what do we see from here? The Rambam Sefer has is connected with eternality more than the Nach. Right? Because those books will go away. So because the Torah and its explanation, which is the oral Torah, this is eternal, whereas the 19 books of the Nach are not. It's kind of an intense reality to realize. Kolomar, yes, sir?
The Rambam's bookstore in Ravendorf, we're going to pass differently than him?
I'm sorry, with the outside, I didn't hear you.
We're going to rule differently the Klachoweiss, no? So with his book should be relevant.
That's an interesting point. He's actually going to bring that up. In other words, is it the Rambam specifically? But according to this, he's saying that it is. But in other words, if the halacha goes a different way, how do we answer that? It's going to be one of our questions. But nonetheless, the explanation of the oral Torah is itself eternal. Kolomar nitzchus HaTorah, which means the eternality of the Torah, davar baror meforish b'Torah she mitzvah omenes le'olam o'olu me'olamim. This eternality of the Torah, which is basically the clear explanation of the Torah, which is a mitzvah which stands forever, ein la lo shina v'lo giroim v'lo tosefes, whereas the Torah itself says, and the Rambam brings in the halachas of the Yisodi HaTorah, that they're not going to change, not be subtracted to, not added to. Nichlalim hilchos shel Torah Shabbal Peh. That notion of the eternal Torah includes the oral Torah. Perush HaMitzvos, which is the explanation of the mitzvahs, not just the actual book, which describes, which is the Torah, but the actual explanation, which is oral. Shal yedam yodim ofen kiyum mitzvahs HaTorah, because only through this will we know actually how to fulfill the mitzvahs of the Torah. Masha ein kein sifrei hanavim hakesuvim, which is not so when it comes to the books of the prophets and the writings. Shekevan she'enam hosafa v'chidush al divrei Torah, there's not really anything added in those books over the actual Chumash, because we know that a prophet is really not allowed to make new mitzvahs. Right? So what is all the books of the prophets? They're not really adding anything. What are the books of the prophets really there for in that sense? All of them are there, so like right, each basically next generation, like Yoshua and the Malachim and David and Shmuel, they all came and they wrote a book, and it's mamash the word of God, but they didn't make any new mitzvahs. What was their book for? It was to tell those people in their generation that it's the word of God, to listen to the Torah of Moshe. That's what all the other books of the prophets are there for, is basically to refer you back to the original with a intense level of divine authority, right? They're all basically telling you, listen to the words of Moshe.
What about prophecies that talk about like days of Mashiach?
They're not adding any new mitzvahs, right? And so whatever's going to be in the days of Mashiach is going to be in the days of Mashiach. We don't need the prophet, so to speak, for it. Not anything that's not already in the halachas of the Torah. Right? There's no, I mean, obviously we rely on them for like logic. If you look in the Gemara, they're going to bring Pesukim from Tanakh. But ultimately, they're not inventing any new laws. All those laws were in the Torah, and we sort of use them to try and understand what the Torah was already saying to us. Yes.
How can it be that they're bringing it, we use what they say as a basis for the
They're not. It's not the basis. It's basically like it's a way of verifying, right? It's a way of understanding, more or less. Like in other words, by looking over, it is the word of God after all. So in other words, we can look and say, like, what did God mean over here? We can understand it from here. But it's not that without that, it's not the word. We already didn't know it. It's that this comes to explain it to us and to point us in the right direction.
We do learn out halachas from that. We do make darshan things and
Darshan maybe, but again, at the end of the day, what we come out with is an understanding of the Torah, which is essentially Torah Shabbal Peh, right?
This is a mitzvah. We know this is a mitzvah.
No, not that we know that it's a mitzvah. We know the mitzvahs without the Nach. They didn't invent any new mitzvahs, right?
You see, I thought you're saying, what's happening in Gemara? Like, when people are debating.
So it's saying there's a discussion of how to understand what are the actual laws, what is the oral Torah. In other words, here's the mitzvahs, what are they? So there's a long discussion, and really, part of that discussion, in a certain sense, is the Tanakh, right? And the Gemara looking at the Tanakh and all the rabbis trying to figure it out. When you get to the end of the story, that's the point. The Rambam's like, here it is, right? So that's what's eternal, the actual final reality of what is the meaning of these mitzvahs, and all the discussion on the way to getting there will go away. It's going to be batal in lasi level. Only the halachas, the actual halachas, what does it mean, will remain. The on the way figuring out how to get there, which in a certain sense includes the discussions of understanding certain psukim in Tanakh, will be, okay, thank you for your participation, we got it, now you can go away and we have our information. Yeah, it's a bit of a chiddush there. Right, the last prophet, Malachi, what is he? Right, he's explaining here how the whole Nach is there to point back to the 5 books of Moses. He says, Zichro Toros Moshe's Avdi, that this whole thing is a remembrance for the Torah of Moshe, my servant, God's servant. Yeah. So if it's true that the Tanakh itself is basically going to be batal, then certainly all the back and forth, as we just described, of the discussions of how to arrive at the Torah Shebal Peh, the manner of how we learn, and the drashas that come from the Torah, it's all just sort of like an intermediary, to actually get to the final conclusion. They're not going to be necessary. They're going to be batal in the days of Mashiach. It's a kind of an amazing. All of your questions right now come out in this interesting footnote number 11. This is a mafarish on the Yerushalmi, where it says, look at this footnote 11. It's very interesting. I actually took a picture of it for a discussion we're having with someone else, where everything is truly coming from the Torah. It says, Amis is adavar kachu. He says, this is the Mara Panim, right? He says that the truth of the matter is such. There is nothing written in the prophets and the writings which is not already hinted to in the Torah. So this that you guys just said that we found it in the prophets, and like that's the source of it. It's not really the source of it. It's just that it makes it more clear what the Torah already said. There's nothing in any of those books that's not already hinted to in the Torah. Yeah. Ela shetzrich bina yeser lotzi aremes min haTorah leida lahavin lahaskil hamakom hahu ma'atorah shenir mazba kol divrei haksuvim. Just what? You need an extra special bina to take out from this hint of the Torah and to know and understand and become wise regarding the place in the Torah that all of this is hinted to. In other words, you have to be mamash a genius to figure out how the whole Sefer Yeshua and every single pasuk in there is sitting inside of the Chumash. But it is. The code zehu achshav. Yeah.
So that meant that all we need is an eichid from the search the risks. Every single thing's in the word of eichid. You want to use that knowledge, when you use that brain thinking.
You could say that, but the word anochi, where is it? Right? Hashem put his words in the whole 5 books of Moshe, and he says this is what's going to be forever. Right? The Torah and the mitzvah. The truth is, it also says the luchos ha'evin. They're also hanging around somewhere, right? So we have those, but the point is that we're talking about what's going to be batul in the future. The Torah is not going to become batul, right? It's true that everything that's in the Torah is also inside of the Aleph of Anochi, right? And if you would know how to dig inside the Aleph, maybe you could find the whole Torah. No one's arguing that. But the reality is that the Torah was given eternally, and it's never going to be added to and changed, and it's never going to go away. But the Nevi'im and the Ksuvim and all the Shakla V'Torah and all the Gemara and all the oral Torah that we ever had is going to go away except for the final Psak in the future. He's still inside of this footnote. He says, Kol Zeh Hu Achshav. In other words, all this, why would it go away? What's the mechanism of all these things going away suddenly? And we're only going to need the Torah. He says, because all this, that you need this extra wisdom and you have to be a genius in order to find all these other Sfarim in the Chumash, that's only now. In the future, when the whole God will be revealed as water fills the sea, right? Lo yitzruchu lilmod zeh mizeh. We're not going to need to learn from one another. Like the full God, we're going to be like little Moses is running around. The whole godliness of everything is going to be revealed to everyone. Kulam yedu v'yaskil l'kol anirmaz b'torah ma'navim ha'kesuvim. Everybody's going to be able to see, look into the Torah and understand all of Yoshu and Malachim and Shaul and David. Everything's going to be, basically, you're going to know it, right? Esther mina Torah minayin, you're going to see right here, right? So this is what he's saying. This amazing thing. Do you have an extra copy for Abraham? You sharing? Okay. So all of it will be batal, and we're not going to need any of it. It's all just an intermediary to get to the final psak. V'az yizgalu tamiyat Torah. At that time, the secrets of the Torah will come out, which we have been discussing in the last long experience we had with this class. So tameo mistam tzmunoseha, as it says, all of the secret mysteries. Torah Hadasha me'iti teitzeh. Right, when this new Torah will come out of Mashiach, as we discussed last time, what that means. Fine. Yesh lomar she'inyan zeh merumaz b'siyum v'chosem sefer halachas da Rambam. So he wants to say that this whole idea that all the books will be nullified and that the Torah Shebal Peh of the Rambam is basically going to be the eternal reality, he says this is hinted to in the last two prakim of the Rambam himself. Shnei prakim acharorim de hilchos malachim umilchamos umelech HaMashiach. Right. So in other words, in the end of the oral Torah, of the Mishnah Torah, he sort of hides this idea. Because he says, Akol holach acharachitum, everything goes after the end. Why does he hide this idea in the end? Because the end sort of contains everything. And if you look at, so he says, Be'inyan bias HaMashiach v'yumos HaMashiach. These laws are discussing the coming of Mashiach. If you look at, I want to do the footnotes with you guys as well, because there's a lot of juicy stuff in here. So footnote 16, Nosav al Tama Pashud, in other words, the simple reason, why the Rambam ends his book with the laws of Mashiach, right, is because Bimos Mashiach, Chozrin Kol HaMishpatim B'Yimam Keshayu Mikodem. It's like, in other words, all the laws that the Rambam is discussing throughout the whole book will come back. So he finishes it with the laws of Mashiach, seemingly just because this is sort of the finale of all that he's written in the book before. Makrivim Karbanos, we're going to have Karbanos again, and Osin Shmitin, V'Yovlos, we're going to have the Shemitah in Duraisa, and the Yovel will come back, like all the mitzvahs in the Torah. Yekiyum Dekol Hilchos HaTorah, there'll be the fulfillment of all the Torah, which is basically the inyan of Mashiach. So why does he end with the laws of Mashiach in the simplest sense? Because that's when all these laws that he just described will come back and be useful again. But the Rebbe is saying, but there's like a hint hidden in it. Why does he end with the laws of Mashiach? Because he basically, what he's trying to sign off with is, when Mashiach comes, this is going to be very handy, because you're not going to have any other books except for this and the Chumash, right? So he basically concludes all of the Mishnah Torah with the laws of Mashiach to sort of explain to you, this is what you're going to need at that time, because everything's going to be batul. Kevan Shimosa Mashiach Tizgale Hashleimus Tehilchos Shel Torah, Halacha Shel Torah, Shebal Peh, because that's when the real greatness of the laws of the Torah Shebal Peh will be revealed, i.e., Einu B'Teil Liolam. When Mashiach comes and everything else is batul, these won't be. Just like the 5 books of Moshe. And this is the Tochen Sifro Shel Rambam. This is really what the Rambam, like, in other words, everything goes after the end. So he's basically saying, like, here in the end, I'm telling you what this book is. This is the Mashiach's Torah. Shemekabetz Kol Halacha Shel Torah Shebal Peh. It has all the Torah Shebal Peh in it. That's why it's called Mishnah Torah. This is what you're going to need together with the 5 books of Moses. Let's read footnote 17. He says, Al Pizeh Yesh Lomar. Accordingly, we can say, Sha'agdei Limud Rambam. Therefore, a lot of people ask, why did the Rebbe make this miftzah? Everyone has to learn Rambam, right? In other words, this is something unique to the Rebbe. You should know. The Chitas, where we learn Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya every day. This is already something that was in place before, that his father-in-law had created a certain Seder Limud that everyone should learn. And the Rebbe definitely strengthened it and gave everybody like the reminder that this is something for everybody, but it was really not the Rebbe's initiative. But like Hasidim asked the Rebbe if he would make something of his own that would be like a daily learning for everyone. And people said, different suggestions. People said, what about the Daf Yomi? It's already a thing, and the Rebbe sort of didn't really go for that as a unifying force amongst Jews, because he says your daf yomi and my daf yomi are two completely different. In other words, the idea that everyone should be on the same page is you're sitting on a train with someone and you have a Jew to talk to. You say like, let's talk about the page we're on. But if you're talking about a daf yomi, this guy's in the marsha and the rosh and the riv, and this guy's trying to figure out the perush amilos. It's not the same situation. So the Rebbe said we want to bring a type of limud which is literally shaykh to everybody. Therefore, he brought the Rambam, which is just psak halacha. That's what the simple reason is. But the Rebbe is saying here is it's much deeper than that. Based on what we're saying now, that the Rambam is essentially like Mashiach's Torah, because it's called the mitzvah, the oral Torah, which will remain when Mashiach comes. By learning it, we bring closer the time of Yemos Mashiach. In other words, we're like basically like highlighting Mashiach's Torah, which is the actual psak din, the halachas. Ein kol galius halal miskansos el b'schus mishnayos. Right, that all the galus and will end in the schus of the mishnayos. What is mishnayos? Basically psak halacha. Revealing this quality of halacha, which will never be bottled forever. So the Rebbe is basically saying by engaging in this Torah, which is a Mashiach's Torah, it actually hastens Mashiach's coming. So this is part of the Indian of the Rebbe's takana of learning that every Jew should learn the Rambam every day. Yeah.
If the point was a unified force, it doesn't really make sense that you have some people on 3 pages, some people on 1 page, and same for mitzvahs.
It is a unifying force. In other words, because really he said you should learn 3 prakim a day if you want to be really unified, right? But the thing is, not everybody's going to do it, so then you can unify with a different group of Jews. And women, bechlal, they're busy with other good things. How are you going to learn a whole parak of Rambam? So he said, at least say for mitzvahs. So, in other words, whatever group that you're associating with, I think in this issue, for example, most people who engage in most are learning 1 parak a day, right? So it's definitely a unifying force. Obviously, there's different... and some people learn all of them every day. Some people learn 3 parak a day and 1 parak a day and sefer mitzvahs a day for this purpose, so they can basically be totally unified. But you're right, there's different getters of how much a person can take on themselves. Person wants to, actually, I saw scary words that the Rebbe once said regarding the whole takan of Rambam. He said it's 3 prakim a day, period. And he says if you're not doing 3 prakim a day, whatever you're doing, he says, is called dvarim b'teilim. If you're doing 1 parak, I read it, it's like shocking. In other words, this is really what it is. But you want to connect to the Rebbe, he gives you like sort of a way to tap into it. So it is what it is. Okay. What's that? It's. I mean, I remember my mashpia he was sitting. I met him in the Kinnas HaShluchim a couple years ago, and he made a meeting with me. It was like, I don't know. It was whatever time of the day it was. He was holding his Rambam, and he looked at me. His mamash a huge Talmud Chacham, and he's like doesn't have any problem. He's like I'm still sitting with this Rambam, hours and hours every day. He said, you think like I would like. In other words, the Rebbe's demand of Shlosh Prakim of Rambam is time consuming, right? It's like basically it takes up a lot of your day if you do it properly. That's what the Rebbe wanted. Okay. But I mean, it is extremely handy. It's basically kol haTorah kula. Like you know the whole Torah. Okay, you don't know all the shakla v'Torah, but you're not a Amma Aretz if you know your Rambam, basically, because he brings every single law in the whole Talmud. I once asked my Rosh Yeshiva. I came to him with a shaila in the Rambam. I said, I don't understand this Rambam, and he said, and why should you? He said, this is a man who put the whole Shas in 1 book, and you want to understand it also. It made me feel better a little bit. Okay. Anyway, so going on to Os base. Yesh levar inyan anitzchus to hilchas haTorah, halachas haTorah, la'asid lavo. Let's understand this concept of the eternality of the laws in the future. They're never going to go away, right? That the halachas of the Torah shall ba'al peh einu b'teil li'olam. Let's understand this. L'chora tzrich l'haven. Seemingly we have to understand. Yedua sha'klal, the halacha kebeis hillel. Okay, so first of all, Yoshua, I told you we're going to answer your question. He deals with it right off the bat. He says it's known that the halacha goes like Beis Hillel. The ad shebeis Shammai b'makom Beis Hillel eino Mishnah. To the point that we learned in our last class, Beis Shammai in the face of Beis Hillel is like it's not called not a Mishnah. It's like that's not even a learning. We hold strictly like Beis Hillel. Eino el bizman hazeh. But we've learned that there's only going to be nowadays. Mashin kin lasid lavo ti halacha kebeis Shammai. In the future, the halacha is going to go like Beis Shammai. V'kamash nisbar b'makom acher, as explained elsewhere. Where is this elsewhere in the Sikha that we just learned together? This is what he's referring to. That shashinoy the halacha yeh al yedei zeh shebeis ted agadol sheyachzor Yerushalayim yamdu leminyan. How suddenly is it going to turn out that the whole halachas go like Beis Shammai? Because the Sanhedrin will reassemble and revote, and the Das of Rov, most of them will go according to Beis Shammai. So it's going to be like a natural, healthy, kosher realigning of the entire Torah without changing the laws of the Torah, because we're going to understand it on the level of Shammai, like we said in the last class. But the Rebbe is pointing out a different thing. How are we saying that the halachas of the Torah are eternal when we're going to see that actually what a massive change? Everything's going to suddenly go like Beis Shammai. Al pizeh yibatlu lasilavu kam v'kam halachas shel Torah shebal peh. This is what Yoshua was just asking. If that's the case, isn't it true that so many laws of the Torah are going to be, of the oral Torah will be batal, including every single thing the Rambam wrote? Right? All the halachas that nifsuku b'Torah that were paskin, including the entire Sefer of the Rambam, which generally holds like Hillel, right? Kadas Beis Hillel, shehalachas elu yibatlu. Isn't it true? In other words, he's trying to understand. The Rebbe didn't make this up, that the oral Torah is never going to be batal. He's trying to understand it, like the rest of us. How is it true they're not going to be batal when all the Rambam are going to be batal? Umakoman yiftuku halachas Hadashas. There'll be new piskei dinim on every single law, like Beis Shammai. V'yiser mizeh. What's furthermore? Okay, so he gives, take a look at footnote 21. He's trying to calm us down. He says, "B'nogei lahalachas de Beis Hillel, regarding the laws of Beis Hillel, yesh l'taretz b'dochek al kol panim." He says, maybe you could give a forced answer to the question we just posed. She'ein zeh chashiv bitul halachas shel Torah. Maybe you don't call that nullifying those halachas. Kevan shenisheres halacha b'Torah be'inyan zeh ela shalacha hi k'Beis Shammai. Because you say there is such a halacha. In other words, it's just that's not the opinion. So the halacha the oral explanation didn't go away. It's just a different oral explanation. But so in other words, you don't have to say it's batul. The Rebbe says himself, it's not a great answer. He doesn't like it. It's a footnote. He's basically saying, like, that's not what I'm thinking, but if you want to say, I could tell you that. Fine. And he says, Yisrael mizeh v'hu ha'ikar. What's furthermore, and this is the main thing, he says, Yedua, it's known, Shilakama Deus mitzvahs betelus lasilavo b'techias hamesim. We've discussed this, we never really got our heads fully wrapped around it, that it says that in the future, mitzvahs themselves will be batal in the future. When? In the period not of what's called Yemos HaMashiach, if you recall, but in the time called Techias HaMesim. Right? Mitzvahs betelus lasilavo. There's such a statement. Right? But Tekufa Shniya, the Mos Mashiach, right? In the second period of Mashiach is coming, Tchias HaMesim, Masha'in came to Tekufa Rishona, the Mos Mashiach, certainly in what we call the days called the days of Mashiach, as opposed to the resurrection, mitzvahs will not be batal, right? That time becomes before Tchias HaMesim. Sha'az hayakim mitzvahs betachlis hashlemus. When in the Yemos HaMashiach, there's for sure will still be mitzvahs in their ultimate perfection. Look what he says here, which is also kind of maybe answers a few other questions in the minds of Chassidim. Footnote 24, before you turn the page, when he says that mitzvahs will be batal in the resurrection of the dead, he categorizes what he means by the resurrection of the dead. He says, when is it that mitzvahs will be batal in the resurrection of the dead? Lifnei tchias hamesim, the kol bnei Yisrael, but all the Jews will be resurrected. Not masha enkin tzadikim shekamim l'techiyah b'techilas Yemos HaMashiach. Right? He says, take a look in the Zohar, Chelik Aleph, page 140, right? Daf Aleph. He says that it's a fact that certain tzadikim will rise in Tchias HaMesim before the rest of Am Yisrael. It's a fact. And at that time, it's not called Tchias HaMesim yet, because we're still going to have mitzvahs. That's not what it means. Mitzvahs are batal. Mitzvahs are only batal when all the Jews rise from the dead. Right? There will still be regular mitzvah performance. I'm not sure how regular it will be if we start seeing tzaddikim rising from the dead, but there still will be kiyum mitzvahs, betachlis hashlemos, in perfection of mitzvahs. Nothing's going to be taken away. Right? And that's why There's questions such as Ketzad Malbish and Lasi Lavo Kishyavo Aaron Abanov Misham Umoshimam. That's why I have a question. How is it? Later we're going to see in the Gemara of Yuma. It asks, how are we going to dress up Aaron and Moshe in the future with their garments when they rise from the dead? Which means we're still going to have to be busy with mitzvahs when there's Tchias HaMesim. So what does that teach us? That there's certain levels of Tchias HaMesim where mitzvahs are still on the table. But after every Jew rises from the dead, we're not going to seemingly be dealing with any more mitzvahs because mitzvahs betelus lasid lavo. You following me?
Yeah.
And he brings from the inside, page 452, something we'll hit tomorrow. We're out of time. Shkoyach.